I've been thinking about investing in the property market for some time, and I've heard a lot about negative gearing, but to be honest, I don't really know what it is and how I can use it.
Yeah, that's all right. There's a lot of hype with respect to this whole concept of negative gearing, and I'm sure every time you log on to an online forum or read an investment magazine on the issue, this concept of negative gearing always comes up. In a nutshell, or in short, what negative gearing is about is providing tax incentives with respect to certain rental properties so that you can better afford it. It helps you with the affordability of having an investment property.
Does this mean I have to make a loss on the property to obtain the tax benefits of negative gearing?
Yeah, on a simplistic level, yes. Effectively, if you think about the expenses you have with a rental property, things like your interest, repairs and maintenance, if those expenses are greater than the rent that you receive from the rental property, well, of course, you're going to have an economic loss.
So if this occurs, am I out of pocket on a monthly basis?
Yeah, you certainly would be. The issue is, though, if you do make an overall economic loss or a loss with respect to the expenses you have for your rental property against the rent that you earn, negative gearing comes in where the Australian Tax Office actually allows you to offset those losses against your other income. And what this means is you can actually access a tax deduction and ultimately a tax refund to help you with the overall affordability of the rental property. So those losses are somewhat negated.
So in other words, the money that I pay in tax on my salary is partly refunded to me to pay for my rental property.
Yeah, that's right. But also, other than negative gearing, there's other things or other mechanisms that you can look at which may actually mean that you're cash flow positive.
Does this mean that I wouldn't necessarily need to find money each week to pay for my rental property?
Potentially, yes. One of the first things to try to understand when you're looking at an investment property and negative gearing is to understand what tax deductions you can actually claim. But in particular, not only can you claim things such as your interest and your repairs, but you can also claim something known as depreciation. And this is where you can claim a partial component of things such as the cost for your depreciating assets. So these are your stoves in the rental property, even your carpets and your curtains you can claim a deduction for. For newer properties as well, there is an ability to claim a certain percentage of the original construction cost of the property, so that can add up quite quickly.
So you're saying I don't need to spend any additional money, but I still get the benefit of the tax deduction against my income?
That's exactly right, and this is the benefit. You've already purchased these assets, you've put the money out when you purchase the investment property, but because of the income tax laws, you get a benefit through these increased tax deductions, which will ultimately lead to a higher cash flow for you.
Are there any other tax benefits that can assist?
There's actually been some interesting and exciting developments with respect to tax incentives that have been offered to certain investors in rental properties, and this is going to help us look at moving towards a more cash flow positive investment.
Oh, I think I've heard about this.
Yeah, the government has introduced a new scheme looking to address the housing shortage that's within Australia. Now, it's got a big name. It's called the National Rental Affordability Scheme, but most people just simply refer to it as NRAS, which is probably easier to remember. The whole idea of this is that if you have an investment property that's eligible, we're generally talking new investment properties here, as long as you rent that property at a reduced rental fee to low middle income tax earners, the government, that includes both the state and the federal government, will provide huge tax incentives to you for doing that.
But hang on, if I'm renting my property at reduced rental fees under this scheme, how is that a good investment?
Yeah, I know, it sounds strange, doesn't it? The government wanted to avoid another public housing system or process, and instead they looked at ways that they could provide an incentive to investors and people out there in the business community to provide these cheaper housing accommodation alternatives. The idea is with tax incentives, they can compensate them for the loss of rent because obviously it's a cheaper price, but also it encourages them because it brings in these positive cash flow benefits.
So from a budgeting perspective, I could end up with more cash in my pocket from the NRAS incentive.
Absolutely, you really can look at buying an investment property and then benefiting from negative gearing as well as the NRAS incentives to look at a cash flow positive property.
Thanks for coming to talk to me, Rebecca. I understand a lot more about negative gearing and the NRAS incentive scheme.
They're certainly worth looking into.